And before I invite Mr. Sumit ji to give his presentation, it's my great pleasure to welcome them, both of them, on behalf of AMA and all of you, with a fresh flower, I must say. May I invite Mr. Sumit to give presentation? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to the Ahmedabad Management Association. Am I audible? Yeah. It's been a long journey from a conference attendee to a conference presenter. So I stand here with a little bit of anxiety as well. Thanks to Padmin Bhai for the introduction. Special thanks to Bhaskar sir, who's been more like a mentor. He's done a great job of taking Ahmedabad to Bombay and bringing Bombay to Ahmedabad via Baroda. Special thanks to him because he's been a very close friend and mentor. And he said you should be in a position to speak about the future of work and also talk in terms of the technology which supports whatever form of work we are likely to see in the future or be a part of. So my presentation, I have I think, hard stop at 12:45, and I expect Padmin sir to ring a bell or give me the signal. I have a habit of overshooting, and I also end up taking more time. So I don't want to eat into your time, sir, Chirag sir. And but the presentation, whatever I have made, it's actually quite a lot. So you can always get a copy of it and go through it. If it doesn't make sense, don't worry. It doesn't make sense to me also. Do I? Yeah. I mean, any product you buy, there's always a disclaimer, right? So I also come with a disclaimer. And as consultants, we always give disclaimers. That's when clients say, I didn't expect this. We said, did you read the disclaimer? So 5 trends, what is happening to work and also what is happening to technology, and then putting it all together. I also suffer from information overload, so bear with me. There are a lot of things which I would want to relay, which I would want to convey, but I hope I do it in an intelligible way or a sensible way. And here's my first slide, and basically this should help you understand what the agenda is. And I'll talk about what is happening to work today, or also for that matter, jobs. But I see that we are today looking at jobs or pieces of work moving, and I don't see this as a new trend. It has been happening always. And I'd like to also reference some personal story there to help you understand that the future, as we see it from today, which may sound exciting and also anxiety-inducing, is something that I have also been part of as through my career journey. And what I would like to then reference is some points from my career journey and make sense of what we today talk in terms of the future of work and how technology is helping us. I think somewhere somebody in the early 2000s in the US decided that we need to parcel a piece of work that we do to somewhere in India. And that's how I started my career. Like, I got a call from somebody in the US who said, I used to work in an academic setting as a prof or a lecturer. Pay was not that great, but I got a call from someone in the US who said, we found your CV on Naukri.com. Naukri.com any idea when it was founded? No idea, 1995. I already feel like a dinosaur in the room. So This person called, and she was a prof in some college, and she was working for this Human Capital Institute, which basically offers solutions to the Fortune 500. And they said, we would want somebody to look at some work which we would want to outsource from US to India. And we'd like to know whether you can take it up. I said, okay, sure, what is it? We would want you to listen to some conversations. And probably that was the first time I heard Marshall Goldsmith. I didn't even know he existed. And Marshall Goldsmith in conversation with, the who's who, or the HR gurus of the US. Okay, what else do? I put it all together, do some best practices, research, and then put together a position paper, which would run into about 8 to 10 pages. Because of my academic grooming, because of my background, I could do that well. My boss was impressed and said, you seem to be good, we'll hire you. And I said, but I'm not going to leave my job because it's a permanent full-time job. And he says, okay, then you could probably be a gig worker for us. And I didn't know what that meant, but when they sent me a contract, I found out that I was a contractor. So, and which also meant that I could be, just as I was hired one fine morning, I could be fired one fine evening as well. So it worked well for me because we used to do odd jobs also. I used to make, at that time, honestly speaking, 12,000 rupees a month, early 2000s. And because, inflation had not started eating into our purse, but it was nibbling at it, we thought we should take up more jobs. Very much like, the challenges which you face today, when there are no good jobs around. So I'm also trying to make a case for what you are going through. Okay, I cannot say I've gone through it, but all of us in some ways have gone through these kind of career journeys, which also explains why gig work becomes critical, contingent work becomes critical, or temporary part-time work becomes critical. So at one time, I must have done 3 or 4 odd jobs, apart from doing a permanent full-time job in a college setting. The college had never heard of moonlighting in the early 2000s, which was good for me because they had, of course, an agreement that we would not work with competitors, but there was no problem with moonlighting back then. Now I see it can be a problem. But work came to me. I enjoyed the work. We used to work 14 hours because I got a cheap broadband connection through BSNL in those days. But it was good because I learned a lot. And this sort of Indo-US joint venture, which I had secretly got into, worked well till, if you can see my slide, somebody, who was doing the same job in probably our Washington office felt that probably good work from him is being taken away and sent to me. So I had my first-hand experience of what we call office backstabbing in a remote setting. Now, when you say backstabbing or office politics happens in an office, I'm surprised because I am like, hey, I worked remotely and I was also backstabbed. But I think I can understand and empathize with him because it was more about, my job is at threat and there's this guy in India and he talks to me, so let me kind of say something about his skills to my boss. Anyways, things worked out well for me. They kind of upskilled me. I went on to become a full-time contractor, again, not a full-time employee. And I also ended up doing marketing their products, which was an LMS, to clients like Infosys and Wipro. So early 2000s, we got Infosys, we got Wipro to buy a learning management solution. And some of you may feel, okay, learning management solution is an innovation that happened probably in the last 10 years. That's not actually the case. Okay, now what is happening to work today? I'm sure something of this kind is certainly happening. In those days, the technology we used was Skype. Skype still exists. Microsoft has acquired it. We used WebEx extensively. In fact, when I joined our partner in India, Dr. Rao, he said, what can you do, Sumit, with what you have learned? And I said, 2000s, we, in the US firm, used to do 365 webinars or webcasts in a year, which was archived, recorded, and sold to organizations as an LMS, almost in 60 different HR areas. So practically anything and everything under the HR sun, we had got it covered, which is why Infosys fell for it in the first place. Now, so my ex-boss now asks me, what can you do with the technology? And I said, can we kind of put together an online workshop? Early 2008, we put together a set of workshops which were offered completely online, almost 3-month-long programs, which
at one time actually covered, because I used to do these sessions live, at one time covered participants in the Middle East, in the Southeast Asia and India. So we had a cohort of about 25 to 30 people who would be a part of these workshops and who enjoyed the online sessions. Now, I thought then that this technology would probably exponentially grow and e-learning would be the future. But when I look at let's say the revenue numbers of e-learning companies today, it's not progressed much. Probably it's progressed exponentially in the last 3 years because of COVID. Now, I'm trying to kind of also help you understand that what you today go through is something that has happened in a very different phase, in a very different pace, in a very different way, also in the early 2000s and perhaps even earlier. Now, the second thing is work can go to anyone, anywhere who has the skills. The second most important thing is, if you look at the org structure, it looks like a standard org structure. But trust me, when I work with organizations, I ask for an org structure which the HR department has, an org structure which the HOD has, and an unofficial org structure that people who are part of the structure share with us. I don't know if you pick that up in any HR program, but we are taught that this is how people interact, this is how people relate. Now, what we find today is as organizations scale up, they become more complex, they become more specialized, you begin to add more roles, and let's say some consultant comes along and says you need to drive efficiency, or you need to bring in technology, and you don't need so many roles. Any particular function here which can be completely outsourced? Take a look, there is marketing, there is finance, there is HR, there is operations. So I worked for an organization where I was technically the outsourced HR head. That relationship lasted only for 3 months, unfortunately. I also ended up discovering that the chief marketing officer there was also outsourced. And I also discovered, and by the way, this is a 200 crore organization with more than 7 plants across the country. Probably now 7 plants, that time 4 plants. And an employee spread out, across 5 locations. So, somebody said, because we worked with the MD, and then I said, okay, the marketing guy, he's also outsourced, he runs a firm, he comes in, designs programs and so on. And I then also met the finance person who was also outsourced. And I am talking about the early 2000s. I'm assuming that sometimes this relationship works, sometimes this relationship does not work. But I find startups in Bangalore, CFOs who are CFOs in 3 companies at the same time. So today, what we are looking at are organizations which are ready to experiment, just as organizations were ready to experiment earlier as well. Here's what's happening so I've given you an idea about how work can flow from anywhere to anywhere. In my case, it was transnational. I have given you an idea about how entire functions can be hived off from the structure. You can take an org structure apart and then probably give it to people who have the skills, or give it to organizations who have the skills. I'm sure you've heard of Edeco. Some years back, I bumped into a subsidiary of Edeco. They come up with what are called workforce solutions, temp workforce solutions. So there's a subsidiary of Edeco which will take care of the entire training calendar. So a large company, 10,000 employees or 100,000 employees, goes to this company called LHH and say, my training needs, please identify. My calendar, why don't you create it? And what LHH does is finds people like us, freelancers, contractuals, part-timers, gigs, puts them all together and says, this is how you're going to work for this organization for 3 months, and these are the terms, and this is how we are working together. So it's not something that I would say is an innovation that's happening now. This is always possible, provided you make a strong business case for it. Now, I've given you an idea about how work flows, given an idea about how jobs flow, entire functions flow out. Now I'll give you an idea about how parts of a job can flow out. Like, I came across some companies during COVID. They said, we don't need the sales team at all. These are small MSMEs, some are large MSMEs. They have been in existence for 25 years. They had to shrink their workforce. But they say, our customers already know what they want, and the entire cycle is taken care of by an inside sales team. Now, if you look at the sales cycle, there can be 7 steps or 5 steps. And what is interesting is somebody at Salesforce.com. Salesforce.com is probably the world's most famous Salesforce software. So somebody there discovered that when employees in sales have to do the cold calling, they may not like it. There is also something called warm calling or hot calling. So some like the warm calls, they don't like the cold calls. Then there are people who are expected to build contracts. There are people who have to close the entire deal. So what he found out was, somebody who headed the sales division at Salesforce, that if you take parts of this entire process flow or workflow apart and ask employees what part do you like most, what part you enjoy most, and then ask them to apply their energy, motivation, or skills only in that area, something exponential happens. So apparently this man has also written a book on it, but what he says is Salesforce grew because it discovered there are parts of the traditional sales job which salespeople don't enjoy. And so I would want people to focus on those parts of the workflow which they really enjoy. So I'm here also making a case, not just from the business side, but also from the people angle. I do jobs today which I really don't enjoy because I cannot have a specialist look at those parts of my job. But I do it because maybe it's part of our consulting engagements. So now if you look at this funnel or look at this sales cycle, some parts of it have been outsourced. We are coming across clients. There's one company we've worked with, 3,000 plus clients across India. They have a very strong sales force which is outside, but they have also a very strong what is called inside sales force. If you look at this slide, you'll really find that there are people who possibly meet customers out there in the street, who have to bring in customers and who have to close the deal. We need them. That's how we understood sales. But because of specialization, we also have sales teams which sit inside the organization, which take care of all the calls which need to be made. They may even make cold calls. They may also make hot calls. But the entire sales workflow, a good part of it for an existing client, is taken care of by the inside sales team. So what you find today is sales roles are also shrinking. Now, I don't know whether that has been incorporated into an MBA marketing program, but these are the roles we find in the industry. That picture there is not of my marriage. Not that I wish it were, but I want to also highlight the human element in this entire transaction that we are talking about. So some years back, I got a call from someone who knew me. And that someone said, look, there is a girl who's interested in marrying this manager. He's in a pharma company, which is based in Ahmedabad. And we want to know whether he's a full-time employee with this company. Now, I didn't know that girls also look for, is this person gig? Is this person full-time? Is this person contractual? Because that says a lot about the marriage market. So I said, I'm not into background check for marriage alliances. I wish I were. It's a good industry. It pays well than consulting. But I said, I can't. What do you want me to do? We know you worked with this pharma company. Can you just call? Because this guy gives us a business card which says area sales manager. He has sales reps reporting into him. This alliance seems to be good. The stars are aligned. We would want you to check. And I checked with their L&D head and he said, no. He's not on our rolls. So I gave the good news or the bad news. I said, this is an enterprising young man, the girl should get married. But the bad news is I don't know whether his job has a future. Right? So I'm sure the marriage did happen. Anyways, because it was via someone, I spoke the truth. And I hope they got married. I'm trying to talk about the human side of taking jobs apart, maybe contractualizing it, temping it, turning it into a gig, because these are life relationships which have also started depending on, what kind of work you do. I've given you an idea about the work. How am I doing on time, sir? Still have 15 minutes, right? Okay. So I've given you an idea about how work flows. I've given you an idea about how entire functions flow out. I have given you an idea about also how the type of employees you engage with can take up a piece of your work or a piece of the job. I'll give you an idea about how locations also seem to be driving workflow. Now, these pictures, they must be reminding you of, the first one, of course, is about rural India. Where else will you see this picture? So again, early 2000s, I met with somebody who went on to become the chief learning officer at Accenture, brilliant young man. He had probably hired 200 or 500 people for Accenture in India. He was in Bangalore. It was very difficult to get an appointment. Met him and he said, Sumit, what can you tell me? I said, I'll talk about talent management. I'll talk about human capital management. So he says, don't joke. We consult the Fortune 500. You don't give me your gyan. Give me some Indian gyan. Is there something India specific about practices, HR practices? So I fortunately had my laptop with me and I said, see, this company called Satyam, which was in the news for the wrong reasons, yes, but it was also in the news for the right reasons. I mean, if you today want to explore a talent acquisition model of an IT company which grew substantially, but which only hired from tier 2 or tier 3 colleges, you would have to go to Satyam. So Satyam is definitely a beautiful example of a talent acquisition or recruitment strategy, which early on decided we will not fight with the Infis or the Wipros or the Accentures, we'll go to tier 2, tier 3 colleges, but we'll groom them well. So in the news for the bad news, but this is also the good news. And I said they have a foundation. By the way, your emergency EMRI or 108 is actually part of Satyam Foundation. So they said, so I told this gentleman, I said, see, they have some NGO, Satyam Foundation. They figured out that farmers have a lean period when they are not working. And with some kind of help, they've made these farmers a little data literate. So they can do the data entry jobs. So there was a photograph of a kind of shack under which there were probably second-hand or third-hand computers. And there was this picture of farmers entering data, early 2000s. And so they had discovered a model where the foundation could support data entry jobs which were not considered critical or not considered important. So I said, this can be a model. And the person at Accenture said, wow, that means I should move out from my metros. And I should go to maybe places like Coimbatore, maybe places like Tirunelveli, maybe places like Indore, maybe places like Dehradun. So what happened with the BPO and KPO industry is it started moving out to tier 2 and tier 3 towns. So it was more of a locational strategy. And I thought maybe, because at that time it grew to 35,000 employees, Accenture, but Accenture had set up almost in 52 cities, in places which I could not plot on a map of India, which of course went through its own scale up and scale down. But today, something even more interesting is happening. So last year, after COVID, the Aga Khan Foundation people called me and said, we are a bunch of businessmen who want to go and visit some families in, near a village in Porbandar. And they said, can we go find out what kind of job prospects we can offer to women, people who were most affected by COVID. So who were into petty trades but who didn't have the capital now, who had run up huge medical bills, but the foundation was helping them, but subsistence. So how can we increase their income? And then we started talking to other people who were part of the foundation, and I discovered that the Satyam Foundation model continues because somebody told us about a self-help group of women in some remote part of Gujarat which are into data entry jobs even today. So I think for businesses which want to look at, let me give jobs and let me also then skill them and let me also look at how I can reduce my costs, these models exist and these will still be part of the future of work as we know it. COVID did something more interesting, and COVID actually induced a lot of people to go home. Home would mean, if you were in Pune, home would mean Kolhapur or Sangli or Satara or even Belgaum. Now, I've worked in Kolhapur, I've worked in Sangli. Now, if you have been there, beautiful agricultural, idyllic landscapes, and there is industry as well, you would not want to leave those places. And so people would migrate to Pune, work there, and Pune is getting as worse as Bangalore in terms of traffic. So 2019 onwards, a lot of people started moving back to their villages, to the point that they even removed children from schools. And so what we find today, we were called to look at
some attrition trends, disturbing attrition trends in an IT company, over 50% almost, and they said, can you find out why people are leaving? And we found out that a lot of people who had joined during COVID had already migrated, and they would not probably come back because they had found potential job opportunities in these places as well. So what I think we are looking at today is work as you think of it may not exist right here in Ahmedabad or in your metro. It has actually moved out. And there are at least 100+ cities which are growing, which are getting connected through infra, which are also getting connected through information technologies. Earlier, there were rural BPOs which were set up, broadband speed was an issue. Today, broadband speed is not an issue. So we are looking at a highly integrated economy, ICT, information technology wise, and that makes jobs movable. So jobs also move to locations where there is talent. I'll quickly go to what is happening to technology. Now, those of you who are in HR or those of you who are not in HR, here's my 10 paise on digitization. So basically, anything pertaining to an employee can be digitized. But when we work with organizations, we find that we don't have a lot of digital information. We are still working with manual forms. Or we did some work for a large organization, which is almost 40 years old, and we looked at certain documents and we found them in various formats and shapes. There were Excel files, there were PDF files, there were Word files, there were note files as well. Now, when you're looking at more than 400, 500 roles in an organization, and when you have files floating around in every format, it becomes problematic. So consolidating it, digitizing it, this would be the first job. And what this drives is automation. And what do we mean by automation? Automation here is, if you look at all the workflows that probably are a part and parcel of any HR process, be it recruitment, be it performance management, be it learning and development, there are already pieces of work which can be automated. I mean, I and someone were looking at probably one of the most famous HR bloggers on earth. We were looking at her page and we found that she'd already probably put up a blog, and this person understands the technology and said, this blog is not yet up because it's so and so time in the US, but she's automated it. Maybe when she got the time, she wrote all these blogs and probably she doesn't even have to worry about it. So that's actually automation. When you kind of use certain processes to automate, look at certain processes and automate it. What can be automated? What can be digitized? Practically everything. From the time employees join to the time employees leave. But this is not easy. Why is it not easy? 5 more minutes, please. People are reluctant to share information. So again, this is the human side of digitization. People are reluctant to share information. They want to know, why are you collecting information? So if you were to collect information across the employee life cycle, if you were to look at HR operations data, it's not there as you would like it. Because if it was there, if I had every data point from the time an employee was hired to the time an employee left the organization, I would probably get into what is called artificial intelligence. Now, what drives AI, to my knowledge, as per my knowledge, is a level of analytics for which HR is not yet ready. These are 4 levels of analytics which you can actually cycle through in an Excel. In Excel. You don't need knowledge of R, you don't need Python, you don't need any kind of dashboard development software like Tableau or Power BI. You can actually cycle through all these 4 stages in Excel. But this is a tool which HR professionals understand. But what HR professionals sometimes may not understand are the numbers. So if we had data points, we could do descriptive, we could do diagnostic, we could do predictive, we could do prescriptive. In simple terms, if I found somebody yawning in the audience, no one is. That's an event for me. And if I look at the number of yawns and the number of people yawning, that becomes descriptive analytics. If I want to investigate, I go to somebody and say, why are you yawning? Am I not interesting enough? And the person may give a reason. So I kind of consolidate all the reasons. That is diagnostic analytics. And I have discovered that the more the distance from the speaker, the more the possibility of the yawn.
I'm not referring to people at the back. Now this is predictive analytics. I have discovered through diagnostic analytics that the more people are away from me, I see that there's a possibility of them yawning. So I have some app here which says, Sumit, start screaming right now. So if I start screaming, maybe it will wake them up. So that's called prescriptive analytics. Also, Sumit, move into the audience and move with such violence that people wake up. Now this is prescriptive analytics. All of this can be done in Excel. It takes me sometimes 2 days to help people pick this up, but I just gave you that in a minute. I'll close with, so technically everything can be automated. If you look at this slide, gives you an idea about all HR jobs which can be digitized, which can be automated. There's actually nothing left for us. If you are an MBA HR wanting to join an HR function today, just pray that the CEO of the company has not heard about digitization or artificial intelligence. So the only thing you can do is pray that the companies you join, people are as illiterate as one can be. Okay? Otherwise, so the CEO has to be living under a rock. But what I have found is, fortunately, it's not just HR, but other functions are also suffering from the same set of issues. But you can prepare for it. What I think you would need is, I'll close with this example. Somebody told the other day, maybe all HR jobs will vanish now that we have ChatGPT. So I said, okay, let me see if my job will go away. And what I found was, I went to ChatGPT and I said, first thing I asked was, can you give me a JD of a management trainee who will be working for an IT firm in Bombay? ChatGPT rustled up or generated a very good JD of a management trainee, right? What I found was actually what people have been talking about, what Mr. Suryanarayan mentioned. The context is not there. The Mumbai context or flavor is not captured. The organizational context is not captured, right? So it's not there. So thank God my job is safe for now. But I also discovered something more interesting because somebody forwarded me a link. I read this book. It's a beautiful book written in 2018 on the future of jobs in the US largely. But what this person says is that the jobs which we find most difficult to do, like generate a JD for a management trainee position, artificial intelligence can take care of, which is true. But the jobs which are very easy for us to do, like giving a glass of water to Padmin Bhai because he's looking at me in a certain way. So that part which is so easy is something that robots cannot do still, which artificial intelligence does not get. So this theory that she builds is all the low value jobs will exist in an economy, and probably the most complex jobs, and trust me, I'm not joking here. I spoke to somebody who was a senior justice at a high court, and I had joined a course on edX, which is a massive open online course. So MIT ran a program which was about 10 weeks program on analytics. It's called the Analytics Edge, beautiful program. We used to get data sets. I learned R, a bit of it. And what I discovered was they gave us a data set of all the judgments of the US Supreme Court, and also details of all the people who issued these judgments. And I mean, what they showed was if you have enough data, say 10 years data, you can actually predict what the judgment would be like if this judge were to hear this case. So I asked somebody who was working in the Gujarat High Court, and I said, is this real? Can this happen? And he says, yes, we lawyers are always doing it. We know who the judge is. We know what the room temperature is. We know what the case dynamics is. So all these variables which have been fed into that Excel sheet and which R is crunching and spitting out, we are doing it. We are actually doing it. But there is a danger. So that danger is, okay, what happens to jobs? So I feel that there is something further to be discussed about this hypothesis that these complex jobs will all be taken away. Here's my example, and this is what I will close with. I'm not promoting Have More, nor am I promoting Hoka. But if you want to have good ice cream, you should try Have More. And I think if you want to have good chole puri, you should try Hoka. Now, I got a link from someone who said this is ChatGPT integrated API where if you enter, you want to be in this city,
and can you develop a 2-day, 3-day itinerary? And ChatGPT, any city in the world, beautifully generates an itinerary. So I went through that process, and I found that there are some problems, and the problems are there. In 2017, Havemore was acquired by a Korean giant, Lotte Confectionery. So the Havemore brand no longer offers you food and ice cream, it only offers ice cream. And the company, which was in business for 75 years, today sells its famous chola, bhature, whatever, and of course, various nice food items. Now this happened in 2017. We know ChatGPT has been trained on large language models, but ChatGPT does not understand this context, that you cannot go to Havemore and ask for a food item. And Hoka is nowhere there in the itinerary which was shared. I also found that it says go to Manek Chowk, and you can have lovely food there. But I mean, all you can probably figure out is that these algorithms are learning. And I think what they seem to be challenging today is our ability to remember, which is memory, our ability to use that memory, which is our experience, and our ability to imagine. These are things which they don't have, and of course, empathy. Like ChatGPT does not ask me, how old are you? Will you be able to take this grind? Can I send you to Sarkhej Rosa? Those things, I don't think ChatGPT understands now. But this is something that we in HR understand and need to understand. So now I see, with every wave of technology, we have a new wave of jobs. So now there is this job of what is called AI whisperer. It's like I should tell ChatGPT, you got that Havemore Hoka thing wrong. It does not work. You also got this Bhatiyar Gali wrong. It does not work. Bhatiyar Gali is not the name of a restaurant. It's a gully. Okay? So these jobs actually don't require coding. They don't require programming. But because so many people start using ChatGPT today, we are looking at a new class of jobs. I found some advertisement on Indeed.com which says you can make more than $100,000 a year if you become an AI whisperer or a prompt engineer. Now, these are the new kind of jobs which I feel the internet economy or the AI economy will throw up. I'll close with this gentleman's line. I think it's important to also not discount experience, and it's also important not to probably see or believe that experience can be completely digitized, completely atomized, and then you can have sentient machines using that experience. Because even in interviews today, we are training people to ask highly contextual questions. We are not asking them to tell me something about yourself. And don't go to ChatGPT and ask these questions. How should I answer? Tell me something about yourself. Because chances are that the recruiter has also probably figured that out. So, thank you so much.